All right. We should be recording.
Both of your backdrops are better than mine.
Backdrop envy. You know, so we should let's just start there. Like right, it's something people can relate with. The difficulty of trying to find a space in your home that you're not ashamed of doing one of these calls. I've been told by people on my team. I've been told by people on my team not to do my calls this way. The backdrop this way is better. So it's funny, but it actually people like we notice these things.
I like the sleeping naked woman in the background. I think that kind of beats us all.
Well, it's just that, you know, it's very often that it comes out like this, and then
and it's just,
you know, that's just gotta be a little bit distracting.
Nora, a butt. Nora, a butt.
Yeah,
Hey,
it's sort of a thought butt. You know, it's like it's a thought butt.
So
I'm finding that my internet's a little unstable.
I'm so excited to get to talk. Yeah.
Give me 1 second. I'm gonna try to jump onto a different Wi-Fi.
Love?
I'm gonna get up to jump. Give me
Okay.
1 sec. 1 sec.
Okay.
Okay. Am I back? Not quite. And we're live.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I feel like we never left, but that's okay.
Okay. Mine, you guys completely froze on my end when I switched, and I still don't have Casey. There we go. Now you're all the way back.
Okay.
All right. Casey, you were going to say something.
Oh, I just love that you coined a new word, you know, the
Symathesy.
Symathesy. I love that.
Oh, I'm so glad.
And I'm going to add a butt thought, or what'd you call it? A butt thought? Thought butt. I'm going to add thought butt to that dictionary. Brilliant. Well, Nora, thanks for taking a call. You know, I am maybe just now realizing that there are people out there that, you know, are living in a space that I'm really just entering into, you know, and I'm normally not dressed like a thief, by the way. It's just the only hat I had today.
It's especially good with that axe in the background.
Yeah, there's an axe. Actually, let me prove something here for a second.
I have a surfboard behind me. It's hidden, but
this axe is a guitar.
Oh.
So it has a pickup, and you use a slide on it.
That's totally cool.
It is not a killing
or functional wood chopping machine.
Yes, no, it's not. But anyway, yeah.
I have a surfboard behind me.
Yeah,
so I think that's pretty good. You've got a guitar axe, so you're outdoorsy and musical. And Nora, you've got a thought butt.
Mm-hmm. We're good. We're good.
There's a metaphor that my dad used to use, and it's always sort of slightly unfortunate because it was a way of pulling people's understanding of the notion of mind and boundaries of systems. And it was to look at the image of the man with an axe chopping a tree, and to ask the question, you know, where is the end of the man? And because, of course, that relationship with the axe is a relationship to the natural world and to the need for housing and to the, you know, the whole relationship to shelter and to So is it the edge of the person? Is it the idea of the tool, which is really interesting for our conversation today around, especially around technology, right? Where is technology in this notion of mind that doesn't stop at the edge of, it certainly isn't just the brain in your head, but even it being the boundary of self, or where the tools and the idea of the tools are in interaction. The shape of the blade has to do with an understanding of the way the trees in the forest are in process, right? So so it's good you have an axe there.
I want to just take a moment, in case we share this more widely, to kind of introduce ourselves and the topic. And I'll start with the topic. As I'm seeing this is at some level a conversation about living and learning systems, or living systems and how they learn. And at some level, there's as you had touched on just now, this notion of fluid boundaries of self. And the reason I'm pulling Casey McPherson, who is a musician and I don't know how to describe you, Casey, but I think of you as just this wonderful human who uses art to explore some really interesting and deep issues of separation and connection and humanity and all of the above. So I wanted to connect Casey and Nora Bateson, who is a filmmaker and author, whose work focuses on, if I were to simplify, living systems and how they operate, how they function, and specifically how they are learning systems. And I'm Matthew Schutte. I work on this stuff as well, with a specific focus at the moment on technology, trying to change the way that the internet works so that humans can do social coordination in ways that are actually better at learning. In ways that more closely mimic these patterns that we see in natural living systems. And I work on a project called HoloChain right now related to that. So that's kind of for folks at home and now seen, kind of moment. I did jot down some notes about things to talk about in case we ran out of things to talk about. But I'd like to sort of, Casey, ask you to just set up the scene for where we are right now in your career and what the project is that you're starting into, because that was one of the prompts that led me to go, ooh, let's have these humans talk.
Ooh, that's fun. Well, so for me, I've been in a traditional kind of band label, musician, rock and roll guy for I guess half my life now. And what I kept feeling was this kind of central focus on a figure, so that the whole business was built around building up a person. With it doesn't really matter what the person was talking about or singing about. It was a mixture of how the music made you feel, and then whether or not you wanted to kind of follow or this person with or without a path or vision, it felt like there was no journey in it other than around money and fame. And so it's like, once I adopt I need success, I need money, I need fame. So that's what I'm telling all my fans and all the people that listen to music. So it's kind of this, like I was reading on your website, Nora, about systems. And it's like, so I was continuing and creating a system, a belief system, that these things are really important, and we make art in order to get these things. And so kind of a cycle of a little bit of kind of there's no end to that kind of cycle, or at least we know that there's very little fulfillment in a lot of that. So I ventured into a kind of membership program where I would give people once a month I would dive into a topic and film it and then write a song around it. and I would let that topic kind of hit me, whether it was, you know, a person that was getting deported when all of those kinds of laws were starting to get in place that I just kind of ran into. And so I started the process around that, or whether it was someone that was dealing with Parkinson's, and so would fly out to Florida, spend a day with her, and then write a song with her. And what it started showing me was, I was lucky to have fans to help kind of support the project so that it could, I didn't go broke doing it, you know. But what it started showing me was that music and film could actually be tools of, I guess what I was so attracted to is tools of exploring our humanity. And it feels like right now that we're on this precipice of a choice, whether we as human beings want to kind of move into the next step of our evolution mentally, where we are kind of letting go of some of these, I mean, I would almost say kind of barbaric kind of cycles that we've adopted in terms of my way or the highway, and fear of others, our seclusion and loneliness because of this fear. And so I feel like for me, my next step in my career, I've started a new project called McPherson, that I want to explore that with 360 film and a record, and explore kind of what it means to be human, but how do we get from kind of this childlike wonder of kind of being okay with every single moment that we're faced, that we're in, and kind of immersing ourselves in it, to this place where we're distracted and lonely and cut off, and needing more and more and more and more all the time, and never being really fulfilled. And how do we kind of get to the place as adults into this kind of place of understanding? And so that's, I'm not sure yet, but this record, I signed this deal with Brigadoon Records from Universal, and this next year is going to be kind of creating and putting this out. So for me, it's kind of a journey and an exploration. And Nora, what I've read about you is just like, wow, there's someone that's been really researching all of this kind of stuff for a while now. So very, very excited to talk to you and hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm really excited about your work too, because it is, I think we are at that moment of making a choice. Is it a choice? I don't know if it's a choice. I don't know if it's a decision. Where that decision happens, is it intellectual? Is it emotional? Is it cultural? Is it like, what is it? I don't know. But there's definitely the possibility right now for a recognition of life through another set of possibilities of perception.
Mm-hmm.
And my hunch is that if we, the great we, could perceive some of the interdependency in the world that we live within, that we might be more careful with it. And in that sense, that perception is I think it's really actually only viable through art. And so I'm not sure how to get at it directly. It isn't in that direct expression or direct correction or direct action. But so much of our way of thinking right now is sort of, like if you're going to fix something, it's like fixing your pickup truck. You just replace the part. there's something wrong with the education system, you just fix the education system. Like, except for that, that's not really where the issue is, right? If there's something wrong with the education system, it's because it's inside a much larger intersystemic process that requires employment and requires an economic system and requires all these cultural ideas of separation and of what is knowledge, what is happiness, what is success, and these things are deeply stewed in. So if you want to work with the education system, you've got to go into this liminal space, the space in between. And that's where art goes. Where is the art? Where is the experience of art for the audience or for the artist? You know, I often have this experience with my own art of feeling afterwards when people are like, wow, what you do is so great. And I feel like a fraud. Because if that art is worth anything at all, if it's any good at all, it's because some things came together through me that just, I mean, can I really claim that? Was it really me?
Totally.
You know, and then if someone rips it off from me, I'm like, hey, you stole my work. But it still feels kind of like that paradox is there of, you know, is it in me or am I my context and my culture? Like, you know, am I just holding that a particular frame on the liminality? I was just talking to a friend of mine, and you know, it's very much like the question of if you were to try to tell someone how to ride a bicycle, right? You can tell them how their feet need to move and how their arms have to steer and how you have to pay attention to where you're going with your eyes and, you know, how you have to keep balance, whatever that is, and how actually that doesn't tell you how to ride a bike at all, does it? So you can go through the function of all of those bits, all those aspects of the system, but the actual riding of the bike is in the integration of that.
The experience of that, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where all those things are coming together, and your experience of riding a bike is yours. And my experience of riding a bike is mine. It's in my body. It's my physical cognitive experience of the world, and how that bike riding becomes something that I can do is not, it's not directly affectable. You know, much to the chagrin of many parents who would like to tell their kids how to ride a bike, and you can't do it. And art is in that space where it's below or above or in parallel to, however you want to look at that, the sort of direct, verbal, conscious space of expression. And therefore, it can hold multiple contexts and multiple forms of complexity. And, you know, it doesn't short circuit.
So I want to touch on a couple of things. The first one is scale. It feels to me that, and I think this is one of the things that really drew me to your music, Casey, with Alpha Rev in particular. And full disclosure for folks at home, go check out Alpha Rev. It's not the new project, it's the old project, but and the album Bloom in particular is just, I found very moving. I listened to on repeat for a year straight, probably. But there's a line from an earlier album that, let me see if I can get it right, is something like, I'm getting kind of rich on the sight of any soul alive. And it's, and you pardon me, you frame up kind of what we're talking about right here, these traditional notions of wealth as accumulation. And you juxtapose that with this experience of aliveness and wealth as seeing something else vibrant. And one of the things that I came to a few years ago was seeing love, the concept of love, as just the recognition of our connectedness, right? And I think that most humans get that. Like, we've experienced that. We've gone through some experience of interacting with someone else and going, oh my gosh, it's no longer just you separate from me. There's a we here. And that doesn't take away from me, but there's a us doing a dance too. And that when we come together and begin dancing in that way, there's a different thing. There's a you, a me, and a we. And at small scales, we're good at that. We can recognize it. We steer ourselves in family and friend groups in those ways. But there are some part of the process of feeling like there's a connectedness there has to do with some feedback loops. I moved this way and you moved that way, and we were able to have our expectations about how this thing was going to work somewhat aligned. We were able to dance in some coherent way. And I started diving into some of the process for how that all gets experienced, or how I'll frame it a little differently, for how I experience you as part of me and begin to lose the boundary, right? And to perceive of, oh, it's us. And then how I may experience the opposite, which usually in my mind occurs with some sort of pain or negative feedback, right? So if we have an interaction and you say something that hurts, that pain leads me to perceive of a difference between you and I. And I begin to put up a membrane, not even consciously, right? It's like, oh shit, that's a thing that harms me. Maybe that's not me after all, right? And we this is a really fluid process of how we define the boundary of ourself. I love the story that you told earlier about the man with the axe and the tree, Nora. And for me, that part's true too, that when I'm learning how to swing an axe, initially it feels like a foreign object. And through practice, I actually get transformed. I try swinging it in all kinds of different ways, and it's awkward, and I'm having to focus all my attention. And then eventually, by trying different things, literally different neural pathways, I eventually find one that kind of works. And I actually get high off of that. And I dive in more, and I repeat that process. And I find it interesting and stimulating to start to gain some effectiveness in working together with this axe. Internally, what's happening is that I'm actually running signal through a particular architecture, a specific set of neural pathways and musculature and all that kind of stuff. And I begin to reinforce the ability to do that pattern. I actually build up the architecture over time. And eventually it gets to a point where we call it's on autopilot. He was chopping chopping wood and not even thinking about it. He was riding a bicycle and having a phone call, right? He wasn't having to do, or she wasn't having to do conscious management of that, because she was, by that point, relying on the architecture that had been built up through previous interactions. And I think that that's not just the case with the riding a bicycle or an axe, it's also the case with humans, and that we learn how to dance with other humans, and we begin to shift our sense of self, literally because of the architectures that we build up internally for how to, those architectures are only useful in context, right? If I don't have an axe to pick up, those set of processes don't quite work, right? Without the accident. I wish they did. I would be a much better surfer if I could practice surfing without needing a good wave, you know? But, and there's some amount of that that's true. I'm able to kind of think surf, but there's a limit there. I want to kind of bring this back after having sort of laid all that groundwork to scale. Humans are really good at this at certain scales. And when our community gets beyond a certain scale, our ability to personally manage the building up of alignment starts to fall apart. And we've come up with mechanisms, with processes, and specifically with mediums for helping us organize at larger scales. And the primary medium that comes to mind for me is writing. That with the invention of writing, we were able to bring a much larger community into alignment about what was appropriate. We were able to write down the rules. And initially those rules were probably religious rules. Or earliest on, accounting. You know, I gave you 2 cows. Later on, even if our memories are poor, I can remember, yep, it was 2, right? Because I can see the little tablet. When we transition to things like formalized religion, not just belief systems, but religion, which is belief system combined with writing, you get the age of empire. You get potentially thousands or millions of people all pointed in the same direction in terms of their cultural expectations, because you've managed to shift away from the telephone game of, I told you this story and then you told it to somebody else and it changed a little bit. And by the time it got 20 hops away, it was a completely different story, The invention of writing enabled us to hold signals in this static way. Even though those signals, these writings, may land in a different context, the signal has a fidelity. It doesn't change in the same way that spoken language would change from hop to hop. That ends up leading to, it ends up supporting specific kinds of organization. Specifically, it ends up supporting a centralized form of organization where the rules live on the paper. The way that humans traditionally organize, and the kind of thing that we're talking about here, about this fluid sense of self, etc., doesn't live external to the participants in a writing. If laws are written in words on paper, where is culture written? It's written in the brains and bodies of each of the participants. These are expectations that we internalize about who is friendly, who is not so friendly. Hey, how do we dance together? Is that right or wrong? And there's a huge benefit, I believe, to this way of holding information. And that benefit is a fluidity and an ability to learn. That when we externalize the rules, we externalize the holding and the controlling of those rules, right? The rules live in a law book, and they are controlled by representatives who we have some voting process, right? All of a sudden, our community's ability to change and shift those rules becomes really bureaucratic, becomes very difficult. And the power dynamics actually become somewhat one-dimensional. It's about, as you had mentioned earlier, Casey, money, or it's about votes, or it's about fame. And this is a one-size-fits-all, one set of rules for all thing. And that actually undermines our community's ability to do diverse sense making. The thing that makes an ecosystem so rich is the fact that the different organisms don't see the world the same way, right? That they each see the world from their own perspective. And from that perspective, they're capable of doing particular kinds of sense making, particular kinds of work. The grass is really good at taking carbon dioxide and water and making glucose. The cow is not. But the cow can totally take grass and turn it into beef and bones and milk. And I can do neither of those, right? But there are other forms of work that I can do. And the ways in which we dance together become fruitful and wealth generating because of those differences. So I'll sort of stop there, but I wanted to kind of throw some of that stuff out.
what I keep thinking about is part of what that precipice, or maybe not a decision, but a precipice that I'm feeling that some of this is when the man swings his axe and gets good at it, he begins to tell people that he's an axe man. And I think that that somewhere we decided that what we did, that we put a value on an internal value on an external process, and that those things began to kind of shape what we saw as gave us meaning and worth, and then we take that meaning and worth and we compare it to other meanings and worths, and we've created this it's weird too. It's kind of like, because you got money that is kind of the written on paper stuff you're talking about, and then you have culture that is kind of written in, it's fluid, like our brains and bodies work, and the writing is kind of like computers, the ones and zeros work, and our values kind of meet somewhere in the middle there, and we determine whether we're worth something or not by all of these sets of things. And it feels like that in rural environments, because I have lived in rural environments, the appreciation of the differences creates a whole so that you can kind of live together and be at peace. So you feel this value of contribution at what you can do, or it's a contribution value, I guess. And then in these more urban environments and wider environments, like, was it Gandhi or someone that was saying how America is the most individualistic country in the world, or so we're now able, with all this urban kind of environments, to kind of create these very I am this, and this is what I do, and this is the value I see. And you could really see that with the indie culture that happened. It was like we don't buy into this, but we're going to buy into this other thing. So it was a cycle of value systems that still kind of leave you feeling a little empty, and it kind of feels like it points into what we're experiencing in technology right now, where we're searching for where those value systems are, and how that works with us internally. And we're kind of it feels a little almost like early teens, with kind of how we're treating it right now, that there's we're just kind of throwing stuff out there, and we're using likes and plays and these new value systems as the worth of our content or art or our expression, and not necessarily, we're still void of the what contribution, or how does this fit in the whole. And so that's kind of where my brain goes thinking about what you're talking about.
I was recently at this session, and this evolutionary documentarian named Lasse Berg was there. And he was talking about the evolution of the Homo sapiens. And there's some interesting things that might be of value to bring in here, which is that we don't have any big sharp teeth. We don't have a lot of fur on our bodies. And we're up on two legs. So we can't defend ourselves. We're really pretty vulnerable. And we're slow. So basically, at a really structural level, we need each other. We are communal beings. And so that brings us, I think, to this question that you were bringing up, Matt, around community and belonging, and where is the edge of self-interest. And there has been a period of our existence as human beings, as two-legged, vulnerable, teethless, clawless community beings, in which we put boundaries around that notion of community. So the very thing that makes us need each other also creates destruction between tribes, between groups, between nations, between, I mean, races, religions. If you start drawing those lines, you can just never stop if you want. So that it's one and the same issue. The fact that we need each other is also the reason we kill each other.
Mm.
And so this precipice is this possibility of reaching beyond that and recognizing that while that may have served for some point, like every other organism in any form of evolutionary process, the day comes when what used to work doesn't work anymore. The thing that used to keep you alive is now going to kill you. And I think that's part of that. And then within that, we get into the I'm trying so hard not to use a word from physics or mechanism, okay? Okay, how about this? The music of that process is communication. It's relationship and communication. Ultimately, that's when you look at interdependency and what interdependency is made of, it's made of communication and relationship. And since communication and relationship lead to more communication and relationship, ultimately that's learning and learning together, or symathesy, it's mutual learning. And then we come back to this question of, well, what is identity in that? How do we begin to recognize who are we in this? It used to be that I could identify myself by saying what I'm not, kind of like set theory in math, I could say which set I was in, and that would give me some form of belonging. But when you start to ask now, who am I? Who am I? Not who was I, but who am I now? Who am I now is a different question than who was I? Where did I come from? Who am I now has to do with who am I in this moment of precipice? Who am I in this moment of transformation and change? And there's a lot of paradox, and I think really important paradox that comes in at that exact moment. I call it the paradox of agency, actually, where I can say I am me, right? And the way I see the world, the way I taste apples, the way I see blue, the way I feel in the Swedish winter. Okay, all of those experiences are unique to my vocabulary of experience, my epistemology, right? And that can be from my genetics to my language, religion, culture, education, socioeconomic position, profession, whatever, right? The pains I've suffered, the gains I've acquired, whatever. But at any rate, I am me. And the world that I see is uniquely Nora, framed. I go around and I see something and I Norify it. And I just run around Noraing. I can't do anything else. But the paradox is that when I try to say what part of me is actually mine, and none of those things that I mentioned a moment ago are mine, they come from my context. So my culture, my religion, my language, my genetics, my history, my socioeconomic position, my experience, the pain, the loss, the gain, the whatever, all of that is from the world around me. So am I me? Who am I? And I think that this paradox is extraordinarily productive and useful right up to the moment you're tempted to solve it. And if you can hold it, then you get those both things. You don't have to choose. I am me and I am my context. And that is a toggle that has a lot of tension in it, but that tension is where the learning is. That tension is where all the change happens. It is where culture happens. It's where evolution happens. It's in that place where I can't really say, am I me or am I my contexts? So I think that in this moment of asking that question, who we are, that paradox of agency is really important, and it keeps us in a multiple contextual process, which is really important. One thing about living systems that's so fascinating is that even though we're tempted to form a big puzzle and put it together and say, like you were saying, Matt, that the cow, turns the grass into methane, among other things, and, we make the milk into energy and this and that. That with our mechanistic framing, that process can get really ossified in a particular puzzle that has a particular solution. And then we draw thresholds around that particular solution to that particular puzzle, with all those parts working in particular ways to form particular outcomes. But life isn't like that. And the thing is, if you fall in love and you lie down next to that person that you love so much, what you start to recognize is there's no way that you get out of comfort next to their body. You fit together 1,000 ways. And that's what life does. It fits together 1,000 ways. If we only perceive one of those frames in the puzzle, it's very important that we keep in mind that we're just seeing one of those puzzles. But there are many frames, many ways that the puzzle can fit together that we've never imagined, that maybe other organisms have never imagined. But the hand hasn't really changed that much in the last 1,000 years, but what we use it for certainly has. So there's that possibility, the whole realm of transcontextual possibility of interaction and communication that is unknown. Anyway, that's what it made me think of.
You're magical, Nora. You are. It's beautiful. It's beautiful because you're exactly right in terms of life. We think in a very, or at least our language is kind of two-dimensional or linear, and we love to define things. We love to create these kind of pathways. Well, if you do this, then this is what you get. And so much of life has multiple outcomes and multiple entrances, and it's as if music and art kind of become the language of that, because it's very difficult to communicate that in language form.
Yeah.
Seems.
So I want to take what you were talking about, Nora, and describe it as a multi-perspective sort of framing. That there's, how Matthew is seeing the world, there's how Casey is seeing the world, there's how Nora is seeing the world, there's how a Matthew, Casey, Nora sees the world, right? Which is different from each of them independently. But influences maybe how each of them, because the things that you've said are going to shift how I see something tomorrow, etc. But there's also this we perspective there, which if you look at how bodies operate, hey, this body sees the world from a particular way, and there's bacteria inside of me that sees the world very differently. But it's an integral part of this system of perception as well. And so this multiple layers, not just nested, but across, n-dimensional, very many dimensions of perspectives, is how I see the world and how I think this stuff actually operates. And before we jumped on the call, I was jotting down some things to talk about. And I thought one of them that might be interesting is that multi-perspective framing is a deeply relativistic way of thinking about the world. That each of these things sees from its own perspective, and each of them in combination is a different perspective that sees. And there's an infinite number of these. And the thought that occurred to me was absolutism, which I think is what we're talking about when we go, we're going to define this, trying to see it from above, from some singular global perspective, versus relativism. And the thought that occurred to me was, let's dive into religion. And specifically the concept of, there's been pushback against relativism by people who are religious. And I think that there's actually not as much disagreement as might at first glance be visible. And the framing of this for me is, I'm going to use the traditional Western sort of puppeteer, all-seeing God. If there is that sort of God, would that God see things from a single perspective? I'm looking at it from above perspective, or from all of the perspectives? From being able to inhabit each and see it from all of them simultaneously. The I see it all from above and it's a static thing feels very simple and like a poor representation of what's happening there. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out because shoot, I've got a knocker at the door. Give me 1 second.
It's God.
Yeah, he's saying, I'm looking at you from the front door perspective.
Okay, sorry.
No, all good. Well,
was it God?
It was not God. It was close though. This is Ray.
Okay.
Hi,
Ray.
Ray is
I
one
don't know. I think Ray could be.
Yeah.
He kind of looks like we've called him Blockchain Jesus on our team. He's one of our developers on HoloChain, and he's in town because we're doing an event focused on value accounting, actually, a hackathon. But okay, so God.
So there's these wonderful writers that I grew up conservative Christian and with very, very solid definitions of that path. And as I began to kind of weave into more experiential spirituality within the Christian religion, I began to experience things that were kind of undefinable. And so it created this journey to find people that were talking about that. So there's these writers, and they're called mystics, and they kind of come from the Catholic, like they actually kind of come from the Catholic area of Christianity, like Thomas Merton and Henry Nouwen and some of those guys, and they talk a lot about kind of redefining how we see, well, how we define things, and that our, the more you think about, the more you experience kind of your spiritual path, the more you understand, the more it feels like you don't know, and that kind of, they talk a lot about being comfortable with the unknowing, and kind of because we have this tendency to need to see from God's perspective, because we want to be good and right, and we want to get it right. So if we can create the structure for ourselves that we feel like is written in a way that we can understand and define, then we can say, I was good. And again, for me, that goes back to value, that we have a hard time with not being able to describe God, or accept other people's descriptions or perspectives of God, because if ours is wrong, then my value is low, and at least for me personally, I think that was part of my journey of now I have way more questions than I did 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and I love that. I love the kind of dismantling of a lot of my earlier definitions that were just meant to try to describe something, That's all I got.
One of the things about having multiple description, which is something that I work with quite a bit, and it's an important, at this moment in our understanding of what research is or what description is, or how to address this idea of the relativism that you're getting at. The notion of multiple description helps us to see the multiplicity of it. Okay? That's pretty simple. The hitch is, once you start to try to pull it apart, the first thing you realize is that you can't pull it apart. And really, where is the field? Is it in the grass? Is it in the earthworms? Is it in the soil? Is it in the field mice? Is it in the insects? Is it in where's the field? And so the relativism aspect of that is kind of part one. And it's what happens after that, which is the notion that the boundaries between them are not separations, they're interfaces. That's where the communication's taking place, is in those interfaces. And in the communication is the life. So for me, I get, when you're like, okay, let's talk about God. And I think, oh God, I don't want to talk about God. I don't want to make that separation. I get so uncomfortable with it. This idea that there's some other plane that is other, that is somehow separate. And I know that I could get my head chopped off by 1,000 different religions right now for the heresy that this is. Did you know that the word heresy actually comes from the word choice? So that pulls you right back to this notion of relativism. It takes a lot of religions to describe life. the sacred is what I'm interested in. And I don't really want to put words on that. I don't really want to put description on that because it's so alive. It moves, it changes. It's not the same. It's if you try to grab it, you miss it. And so, I mean, I'm one of those California kids, you know, I spend a lot of time in ashrams and in yoga centers and in Zen centers and in India. And then the one place I didn't spend a lot of time was in the church, but I did live in the Middle East for a while. And, you know, a lot like academia, I'm not sure that, ooh, I really am going to get my head chopped off for this.
No.
I'm not sure that I've ever really met anyone for whom religion made them a better person. You know, I'm not sure I ever met anyone for whom academia really made them more wise.
So
So
can I?
there's something there. Yeah, anyway, it's that notion of separation. I don't want to make the separation.
The definition and the drawing of lines of separation, I think, is how you're referring to that. Academia, not as in I want to study, but academia as in this is physics and not biology. The whole pulling things apart and the process of trying to define, to separate and go, no, this is a thing that is different from this over here, which the way I perceive of that is language and this whole process of defining can be useful shortcuts. They don't get to the reality of the complexity of what's there. You know, I can pick this up and go, hey, it's a water bottle. And that's not the full story, right? It's a nice shorthand word that I can use, but this water bottle is interacting with the world around it. There's flows of temperature, there's chemical interactions. At some point, this thing is going to shatter or melt or disintegrate in some way, or some new bacteria is going to figure out how to eat it, right? And it's going to change shape. It is interacting with its surrounding environment. Nonetheless, the label water bottle enables me to go, hey, can you pick up the water bottle? And it facilitates coordination. One of the things that I've been working on lately is, and this is kind of like off-topic fun. You know, my job with HoloChain is to try to explain what we're doing to the world and why we're doing it. And the off-topic stuff is actually the much deeper philosophical, hey, how does communication in life actually work stuff. And I've been trying to extend a really prominent academic's work. Claude Shannon basically founded information theory. And he wrote this paper, A Mathematical Theory of Communication, and he described communication as the task at hand is to send a signal and have it not change. And that idea that this is what communication is, it's a message going from here to here and being the same over here as it was over here, misses the point of what communication is. So he misses the larger context of this being, as Nora would describe, this feedback loop of mutual learning that enables these parties to change shape. And as a result, the whole field of communication and information technology is not designed, and the ways that the systems that we built are not good at helping us learn. Because we actually described the problem wrong from the get-go. And I want to just take a moment and talk about how computers work today and how HoloChain, what we're trying to actually do here, because it's related to all of this, and then my job part of this conversation has been sort of fulfilled. Like writing, the way that computers work today or computer applications work, is we have a sort of a central place where the rules are held. In the world of web applications, this is a web server. And so in order for me to send you a message on Facebook, I don't send the message to you, I send it to Facebook. And when you log in to Facebook, Facebook forwards it to you, right? Or if you're already online, they forward it to you. And when you reply to Facebook. And there's this man in the middle that not only watches all of the stuff that happens, but is responsible for passing notes, basically, between us, and decides what kind of notes we can pass. Are you able to pass video? Are you only able to pass 140 character messages? Are you, et cetera. But they get defined by that company in the middle. And we don't get to go, hey, this way of playing together doesn't work for me. I want to play differently. The rules are held by this party in the middle. And as a result, the ability for us to learn is constrained by this bottleneck and the incentives that they have. That's not how culture works, as we pointed out before. Culture is held, unlike law, culture is held in the brains and bodies of each of the participants. Well, we're trying to enable software applications to work in that same way, for them to be held by the participants themselves. For the participants themselves to go, hey, these are the rules that I want to play by. And if you also want to play by those same rules, great. We can play this game together, whether that game is Twitter or Uber or blackjack, right? And if one of us decides, hey, this isn't working for me, I want to play by some different rules, I can. And anybody else who wants to play by those rules can too. But in addition, whatever games I'm playing, if I'm playing Twitter with Casey and he sends me some message, I'm able to share that in a different context. I'm able to take that and speak that into Facebook with Nora, or Uber, or whatever, or a calendar thing that I'm running with Nora. And I end up being the bridge between these different social spaces. The concept for us is, as humans, we do this, we call the term is holographic storage, this idea of each of us holding the content ourselves from our own perspective, right? And being able to collaborate despite that. It's how language is stored, it's how culture is held. We see this pattern as actually being the key to learning. It's the key to adaptive capacity, because it enables one of us to go off and try something new without having to put everyone at risk. And if what we experience proves positive, hey, great, we'll keep doing that dance, and we might share it with somebody else. And if it proves a positive experience for them, they'll do it too, and the learning can propagate. And so for us, the goal here is, we're trying to change how computer applications work, because we think that enables humans to actually do social coordination at scale in ways that really improve our ability to learn together. In part because it makes it so we don't have to learn lockstep with one another. That one of us is able to go, ooh, I want to try something a little different. So by bringing agency back into the system, we actually really improve not only the control and the positive emotional experience of what it's like to operate in this system, but we actually improve our ability to generate higher forms of coherence and have a learning process of, hey, this game, which is a bunch of us playing together in a particular way, is a higher form of coherence. It's a way of interacting. And it ends up, if it proves useful, it enables us to persist that. And to when any of us start to experience it as not useful, we're able to go, ooh, I need to change it. And so that's why we're building what we're building.
Matt, why does it increase the generability of learning?
I'll give a contrast. So a system where there's one person who holds the rules,
Mm-hmm.
and all of us need to petition that party,
Mm-hmm.
and then a system where each of us holds the rules. If one person holds the rules and we need to go, hey, can we change the rules? We as a community have to decide whether we're going to turn left or turn right altogether. As a result, if we choose wrong, the cost could be catastrophic. Our community could fail entirely because we some new thing and it didn't work.
Okay.
In natural systems, that's not how they work. You may have a whole colony of ants, but they don't all decide, okay, we're going to go over here. They decide, each of them decides, hey, I'm going to go explore over here. And another one goes, I'm going to go over here. And another one goes, I'm going to go over here. And the guy who went over here, he may die. He's taking a risk, exploring new territory. And if he finds something useful, he may be able to spread that knowledge, and a whole bunch of others will come over and be able to make use of the opportunity that he's surfaced. But the cost of that exploration took only his time and risked only his body, right? The risk was local to him. Though the learning could benefit the entire community, the risk was constrained. By enabling us to explore many paths simultaneously and constrain the size of risk, we actually maximize our ability to learn at higher levels because we've made it so that the risk doesn't have to be catastrophic. Our ability to move separate from one another is actually a key part of what it takes to learn. And as individuals, we do this too. We do it in a time-based way. So I spend a little time trying a thing, and then I try another thing, and then I try another thing, and I try another, and I'm struggling to figure out how to walk, right? This is a really abstract example. It's probably a very poor one. I don't go, okay, for my entire life, I'm going to try this one thing, right? I'm able to attempt that and then cordon that off as, hey, I wasted that time on this, or not wasted, but I spent that time, and then be able to try something different a moment later and different a moment later. And at some point I find something where I get, oh, that seemed to work. And then I may choose to spend my next bit of time repeating that process and reinforcing and exploring more there.
You
So
know,
that's, yeah.
what it makes me think of is right now, look, what you're talking about with Facebook, and it's kind of the entrepreneurial kind of language has been over the last, 5-10 years of, oh, social media platform. What's your platform? What's your kind of middleman process that puts you in between an interaction with someone? And one thing that people love about that is the data that they get out of those interactions for advertisers, and then this was a good gone bad for tailoring your experience without your choice. And so you can go on, like, let's say I have to play some cover songs and for this wedding, songs that I absolutely hate. This just happened. And I had to download this song that was horrific. Well, now iTunes is giving me more options of more horrific songs because I downloaded that horrific song. And what I've heard people say is that what it does is it kind of starts narrowing your view because it's tailoring your experience to the AI that we're so proud of, that's kind of reading our data and tailoring our experience, is actually conforming us into kind of this narrower thing, you know? And so what I love about what you're talking about is, if, you know, we've used the term open source, which has the ability to kind of attach onto things and change things. But it's always been, open source has always been more for the coders, you know, and not for the end users, or the consumer, you know. It's never been an internal kind of open source, like, and originally, if we remember, internet started peer-to-peer, you know, and it became this kind of other thing. And so I really love the vision. And I think that it's part of that kind of, everybody's pond is fun to play on. Everybody's yard is worth putting a lawn chair on, you know, and not it being, not that those massive playgrounds won't go away, but the value of the rural internet, the rural, the smaller scale kind of interactions that don't need to be, or that data isn't the driving factor behind the creation of it, you know, I think is really unique and beautiful.
Yeah, for me, the shift there is very much kind of what you pointed at, and it's a perspective shift. You know, do I think that AI is going to be useful in the future? Sure.
Yeah.
Do I think it's great if that AI is a single perspective that sees everything from above, from one single vantage point that's driven by the desire for ad dollars? Probably not so much, right? That sounds awful. I think most of what Black Mirror, if you guys have seen the show Black Mirror, it's this wonderfully dark sci-fi series that you can get on Netflix. Most of it's about agency and identity. And it's about these questions of, wow, so many of the things that we're doing on the technology side right now feel really creepy, and they have these ethical problems. Basically, there are these trajectories that lead to not awesome outcomes. And so much of that show is about identity, perspective, agency, and ethics, right? And where this stuff all leads us. But it's, from my perspective, it's all driving out of this anxiety around, ooh, AI, the future of AI, as we've been told about it, is this top-down thing. The future blockchain, for all of the hype and the billions of dollars, is a top-down system. It's we will see everything from the perspective of the network as a whole. Holochain is not that. It's the opposite. It's each of the parties sees the world from their own perspective. And to the extent that they want to come into alignment and be able to communicate with someone else in a particular way, they can. And there's nobody else that can stop them from choosing to do that particular dance. The only thing that would stop them from choosing to do that dance is that nobody else wants to do that dance. Right? I mean, they could still do it themselves. I'm just not able to actually interact with others if nobody else wants to play that way.
There's a song about that, I think.
Dancing alone. Anyway,
Yeah.
I want to share. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really, really, it's interesting, and it's going to be fascinating to see where it goes, and to see where the old habits of thinking really rub up against it.
Sure.
And I'm so excited by what you guys are visioning and what you're putting together, and the possibilities in it, because it never can be explicit. And I think that's really fascinating. So if all of the players are metabolizing the information in their own way, there's no way that they can even know how different their particular version is to anyone else, and where that difference can create contrast and comparison and information. I mean, that's what information is that ability to see where things are not the same.
But they will have experiences, right, where they'll go, hey, I danced here and I danced here, and that one felt good. and that's the thing that enables them to go, they won't be able to look at it from above. There's no above to look at everything from, right? So they won't be able to pick out in advance, over there is going to be fruitful, right? But through just how ecosystems work, through lived experience, they're able to go, ooh, this dance is working better than that other one. From
I mean, I guess what's ironic about that at some level is that I think that there is a certain, at least percentage of people who believe that that's how the world is now.
It totally is.
That's essentially what a free market is. I mean, I'm being provocative.
Yes.
I know that that's not true.
Right. Okay. So let's
but
talk
the perception, the illusion is there.
That's right.
And the same is with the idea of democracy, right? This last election was a really interesting experiment of this idea of choice. And I have a whole bunch of kids, and when my kids were little and it was bedtime and they didn't want to go to bed, I gave them a choice. Okay, so if you don't want to put your pajamas on, you can brush your teeth. right? And so they had a choice. And of course, they didn't have a choice. And pretty soon they got wise to that, and they were clever enough to work out that they didn't have a choice at all. That it was, in fact, bedtime. But for a little while, I got away with it. And I think, there is this illusion that you can go around in Facebook and just go where you want to go, and you can explore, and you can find your way, and you can like what you want to like. No one tells you what you can't like, except for that it's that thing of, looking. Part of what communication is what it's possible to say, not what's said or even not said, but what is it possible to say. And when I'm talking to Matt and Casey, there are a lot of things it's possible to talk about that it's not possible to talk about in other frames.
Right. Especially with this crew.
Yeah.
Guys, I have to run to a lunch, and
I have to run to a dinner.
I could talk to y'all for the rest of the day and not run out of places to explore. Nora, I've always, Matthew, like, his brilliance, your brilliance has blown my mind, man, and I can't wait to hang out again. And Nora, just
likewise,
your beauty and the way that your perspective is beautiful, and it's definitely added a lot to my experience in my day. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Casey. Yours too. And I really loved meeting you.
And I want to say one last thing before I let you guys run off to lunch and dinner, which is just a gratitude. It is really difficult for me to describe our why, because it is so deep, right? And in our presenting of all of this to the world in general, so far we haven't really gone there. We've talked about, we're changing applications, but we haven't yet figured out how to really get at what is the real transformation that we're trying to bring about in the world. And just want to say thank you for exploring fairly abstract territory, right? Though it may be really important. So thank you across all of its dimensions. And the last point there is, as you had pointed out, Nora, lots of people think we already live in that world, but the problem is the systems we have today can't handle the dimensionality. They reduce everything down to just dollars or just some votes. And that's a very limited ability to do sense making. And so gratitude all around. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you, Matt.
Thank you,
always
Nora.
Great to talk to you. Thank you, Casey.
Y'all take care.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye, Matt.
Bye, Nora.